for coming. Today, I'm Mark Cotner, and we're going over our safety training for the quarter. This time, we're going to cover HAZCOM, or Hazardous Communications, and specifically the new, what we call GHS standard. So, basically, in a nutshell, is we talk about the chemicals that we deal with on a daily basis in our environment. OSHA, which oversees hazardous communications, has some revisions that came out in 2012. They had a mandate that said by December 1st of 2013, we will provide training for all of our employees. And so that's why the training is scheduled today. I'm actually doing these all out throughout industry. Started out this morning at 7 o'clock in Ramona. Tomorrow I'm booked up, I don't remember how many I'm doing tomorrow, to try to meet that mandate. And so primarily there are two major areas that have changed if you've dealt with hazardous chemicals before. One is in the MSDS sheet. How many of you all have seen an MSDS sheet? Okay? If you haven't, we're going to look at one today. If you have looked at one, we're going to look at it even more in depth than we normally do. Those now will be known as SDS sheets. So kind of what happened there was we buy and sell chemicals around the world anymore. You buy a chemical, it doesn't necessarily come from Tulsa or from the United States for that matter. It may come from another country. Everybody had their own way of labeling them, and so what they've done now is gone to a global system so that when it comes down, we can look at it and identify the hazards and how we handle it, how we package it, how we ship it, those types of things. So that's called the GHS, Global Harmonization System. Also with that system, all of the new MSDS sheets, which now are called SDS sheets, are going to have a symbol on them, what we call a pictogram, so that we can see it, even if we don't speak that language, that we can identify and say, okay, that has these characteristics. And so we're going to talk about those today. So really quick, I'm going to share some stories with you before we get started. It kind of helps make it more real to me. The first time that I ever dealt with an MSDS sheet was back in the 80s. I worked out in industry at a company where a friend of mine ran the plating department. Plating is where we put metal, we coat things. We either put nickel on it or different types of materials will coat it. And so he ran the plating room. This particular day, he had to tighten a hose that delivered liquid nickel into the plating tank. Now what happens, guys, with this sometimes when we deal with chemicals is when we first start dealing with them, we're really scared and we're very careful. The more we're around them, sometimes we start to get careless because we're familiar with it. We aren't as cautious as we should be. So what my friend did that particular day, as he was tightening a hose clamp that delivered liquid nickel into his plating tank, he didn't have on his proper PPE. What's PPE? Personal protective. Okay, so he didn't have on his face shield and his gloves. He reached across the tank. It was under pressure. It was pumping liquid nickel into the tank, took a screwdriver and went to tighten the hose clamp. The hose clamp broke, the hose popped off and shot him in the face, filled his mouth full of liquid nickel. Now, if you'd asked me at that time, you know what an MSDS sheet said, oh yeah, I know what they are. Guys, I had a real learning experience that day in that, first off, I didn't even know where our MSDS sheets were. This was back in the 80s, the mid-80s. I had to go find that. I had to figure out how to read it. Okay, I, like a lot of you, may say, oh yeah, I've seen those before. I didn't know how to read it. I didn't know how to read it. And my friend's life was on the line here. I had to make a decision. What do I do with him? Sometimes these, MSDS sheet will tell us how do we treat it immediately, and then what do I do afterwards? Sometimes they'll say, induce vomiting. Sometimes they say, do not induce vomiting. Sometimes they'll say, giving milk right away, because we're trying to balance out the acid there. Sometimes they say don't give milk. Sometimes they say give water. Sometimes they say don't give water. So I had to go find it, then figure out how to read it, and make a decision on what to do with my friend before we send him off to the hospital. Not a good way to learn how to read one. So we're going to spend some time today. Does everybody feel comfortable reading an MSDS sheet?
Yes, right, I do. I teach it. It's easy.
Awesome. We're an expert in the room. She can check us here. Okay. So, guys, that was my first experience. Second experience, well, I'm going to jump through a couple of personal experiences just to kind of make this relevant. The first time I started dealing with chemicals was when I was 5 years old. Okay, I can tell you where I was at. My family owned one of the biggest nurseries in Tulsa for many, many years. from the 40s up till about 93. We closed that nursery. It was my grandparents on 55th and Lewis. As a part of that business, we grew all of our own trees, and then my granddad had a spray component to that we'd go out and commercially spray pesticides and herbicides. He did that for many, many years. We had the big spray tanks, kind of like you see Benny around here once in a while spraying. We had big spray tanks that would allow us to spray up to 150 feet. So we'd come spray your trees. If you got webworms, you got bagworms, those kind of things, we'd come spray those trees. When I was 5 years old, I would drive, that's when I started driving the spray truck through our fields. My dad would prop me up in the seat so I could put it in gear real slow and I could crawl through the field while my granddad and dad stood on the back of the truck and we sprayed our own nursery trees. Okay, and at that time, some of you guys have heard these chemicals, some of us that have been around longer, didn't say older, been around longer, well, have heard these terms DDT and chloridane. Okay, younger folks probably haven't because we kind of got rid of those things, but DDT and chloridane was awesome. Man, it was like bug killer deluxe. You can spray that stuff and it had a really good kill rate on it. So back then, early 70s, we were spraying DDT and chloridane. That stuff was falling all over me, falling all over my granddad, falling all over my dad. We just used the stuff. It worked awesome. I remember back then asking, not when I was 5 years old, but as I got older, and we'd go out and spray people's houses, you know, spray trees in their yards, did a lot of commercial spraying. I remember asking my granddad back then, I'd say, hey, how come we don't wear respirators, we don't wear, you know, all I didn't know it was called PPE, why don't we put all that stuff on? My granddad had a very, very, very good answer for me. It was a very good point. He said, son, we don't put that on because when we pull up in someone's house, they've called us to spray their trees. If we come up and put a respirator on and all that garb, they think, oh my gosh, that stuff's really bad. And then what happens is 2-3 days later, their dog eats something bad and dies. They go, oh my gosh, it was the guy's spray and they poisoned him. And so it was from a fear factor. He's going, I don't want people thinking that this stuff is really, it wasn't that bad. People overreact sometimes. So he said, you know, we want to make sure that people are comfortable with what we're spraying, and that's why we don't do it. Okay? That's a good answer. You know, it made sense anyway, and so we sprayed for many, many years. And then in the late 70s, we quit. We found out DDT. The government came out and said, hey, that's bad stuff. That's bad, bad stuff. It actually was originally developed in the 40s to fight malaria, because malaria is spread by mosquitoes. Now, I'll tell you, we found out how bad it is, but I read an article this morning that they're actually encouraging people in Africa to use it inside their homes now, because the effects of malaria are much worse than the side effects of DDT. DDT is very effective in killing the mosquitoes, and it's better to do that than to... But in the United States, we've banned it. Okay, chloridane, as I got older, I became a certified licensed spray applicator. Went through all the training, got testing, carried certification for many years. I could buy chloridane. In 2003, I could still buy chloridane. I don't know if I can now or not. I haven't looked recently. Had to use that in a very controlled environment, restricted use. Consumers can't go buy it. You have to be licensed to buy chloridane. So we've replaced that with some other things that maybe aren't quite as effective, but they're also not quite as harmful on us. Okay, so I want to talk to you about a couple of things. We'll cover this from many, many angles with chemicals. Then what we started switching over to was something called malathion and 7. Anybody in here sprayed malathion? Oh yeah, yeah. I guarantee. Probably everybody in here has done it under another label. Yeah, 7 dust. If Tanya lives out on a farm like me, and we put 7 dust on the dog or on the cows and keep the flies off of it. We went to 7 dust and malathion. You buy it at Walmart under some other name. You look on the side, it says malathion. I've got an MSDS sheet. We're going to look at that in a little bit. We used to mix malathion and 7 a lot because malathion kills bugs on contact, but when it rains, it goes away. We mixed 7 with it so it had some residual kill for it. And we sprayed for years. Now let me tell you a couple of things about all that. In 1993, we closed the nursery. I bought most of the nursery's equipment and kind of picked up a lot of that when my granddad retired. The last thing my granddad sold me, and we didn't want to sell me, was the spray side of the company. He didn't want to sell me that sprayer. He said, son, because what I figured out is anything that kills a bug will eventually kill you. That was 93. 2001, my granddad died. He was covered with skin cancers. Probably a big in part just from the spray that fell on us. Okay? Some of that stuff some of it affects us right away, chemicals. Some of them affect us right away. Some of it we don't know, for a long time. I'm going to tell you a little personal story. I'm giving you the fast version of this. I don't have a doctor's study to prove this to you, but I want you to think about some things as I'm talking about chemicals here today. My whole life I've been around spray. I've been around those chemicals, pesticides, my whole life. Guys, I've been last 10 years I've been in Idaho. I've been away from spraying. I quit spraying, let that all lapse. When I moved back this past spring, for the first time in my entire life, I got a chigger on me. I'd heard people talk about chiggers. It's not that I haven't been around chiggers, I just never get chiggers. Now that I've had chiggers, I'm thinking about going back to spraying. But here's what scares me about chemicals. When I went through all the training and the courses to get certified as a spray applicator, one of the things that they drive home to you is that some chemicals can get inside your body and your body has no way to purge them out. DDT is one of those. DDT, what we found out about it is once it gets in your system, it gets stored in the fatty particles of your body. I don't know if that's motivation to go on diet or not, but once it gets in there, you can't get rid of it. This is a personal story. It's a personal story. I don't have a doctor's, and I hope I never have doctor's proof of this. But I do know that when I got into high school, I first started noticing it. I have coon dogs. I shouldn't say that in front of a bunch of educated people, but I like to run my old hounds. And I've done that all my life. But when I was in high school, me and my buddies, we'd go out coon hunting, and we'd walk through soybean fields down the verdigris bottoms that deep. We'd come out the other side, and my buddies would have 5, 10, 15 ticks on them. I'd look down, and I might have one on my sleeve. Ooh, why don't I get ticks? Isn't that awesome? First I thought it was awesome, then it started bothering me. Why don't I get ticks? And I've just noticed that over my life. I don't get bugs on me for some reason. You go, that's just coincidence. Okay, all of you all probably have a dog or know somebody has a dog. And you probably do just what I do. I go up to the vet, I buy the little pill, I give it to my dog, he ingests it, and then he doesn't get fleas and ticks. How's that working? That's a chemical that we've ingested into his bloodstream, and I don't know what it does, I'm not a chemist, but it either makes my dog smell different or taste different. That's a chemical in his bloodstream. I think that I've done that to myself unintentionally over the years. My granddad and I hunted our whole lives. I never, not one time, and I'd know because we hunted a lot, not one time did I ever see him pull a tick off of him, ever. My dad's the same way. I've probably seen my dad have 3 ticks in his life. And I'm going, why is that? What about me smells different or tastes different or, maybe I stink. Maybe you all know that it's because I stink, I don't know. Okay, but guys, some of those chemicals get in our bodies. We've got to be careful about that. That's a big fear. The last example that I'm going to share with you is dealing with MSDS sheets. You've got to always go back periodically and look at those MSDS sheets because they change over time. If you pulled up chloridane in the 1960s, the informational sheet on it would have said anything about it being bad. We didn't know it was bad. Okay? When we got into the 70s, we went, oh my gosh, that stuff is really bad. When I was in industry, we used to use something called trichloroethylene. I was impressed in the last class. You know what it is? Awesome.
Good stuff.
Darn good stuff. In the 80s, we used it out in industry. We called it souped up alcohol.
Yeah.
We'd be working on a gearbox and we'd get grease all over us. And I honestly remember, I'd go over to the 55-gallon drum and get me a big old bowl of it and a dish rag, and I'd wash my hair in it. They'd cut that off of you. You're going, whoo, that's good stuff. You knew not to smoke around it, you blow up. But as long as you do it smoking, it's good stuff. Then one day, the safety coordinator came and said, hey guys, there's a new MSDS sheet on this thing. Uh-oh, carcinogenic. Causes cancer, bad cancer. That's why most of you have never heard of it. It is still in carburetor cleaner, I think it still has. There's some that still have it in, but there's a lot of warnings about it now. Interesting, this morning when I was at Ramona, I pulled up, this was weird, DDT, probably everybody's at least heard of DDT, it was so bad. Do you know what the T is in DDT? It's trichloroethylene. I had no idea. So sometimes we use chemicals for multiple uses. And it's, You know, it was all wonderful stuff. Like asbestos years ago, we put asbestos in everything because it wouldn't catch on fire.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, oh my gosh, that's bad stuff. So anyway, last example here is in 1994, I had bought the spray rigs, and my brother and I gotten certified, and we started spraying. Well, back in the 60s, 70s, up until the oil bust in the early 80s, there was a lot of residential home developments being built. You remember that? Those are the older. We built a lot of houses around Tulsa. Some of you guys weren't born yet, but in Tulsa and Broken Arrow, we built a lot of houses. Builders would come to our nursery and they'd say, all right, here's what I want. Here's a landscape plan. I can tell you, I can take you all over Broken Arrow in South Tulsa and show you development after development after development that we landscape. They'd say, we want 2 trees in the front yard. We want something with color in the fall. We want something that grows fast. And the key thing, cheap, cheap, cheap.
Yeah.
That's what builders say. That's what they want. Okay? So we found out when we grew all our own trees, we could grow sweet gum trees like mad. We could grow them things fast, cheap, good color in the fall. Beautiful. Good shape. Okay? But what happens? There you go. When they get big, they have what?
Balls.
Those stupid balls.
Right. Builders didn't care because the trees didn't have them when they're young.
It was sold.
That's right. So here's what happens in '94. All Indian Springs, all those developments down there that we used to landscape, there was a product came out called Florel. And Florel is a fruit eliminator. What you can do is in the spring when a sweet gum tree sets its bud, I could come in, I got a 2-week window, I could spray those trees and it wouldn't have any of those balls on it. Man, and we didn't have Facebook back then, but I mean that word spread like wildfire. I got more calls, come spray the trees, come spray the trees. And I'll be honest with you, I made a fortune. I made a fortune, $50 a tree. I'd pull into the development and it was house after house after house. You know, an hour and a half, I made $1,000. Man, I could spray that stuff. That was good stuff. So I did what a lot of us do. I bought the chemical, I looked at the spray sheet, and they told me how to mix it. It told me some precautionary stuff. All I saw was dollar signs. Man, I said, put that thing away, we won't make some money. Okay? So I did that. One day, and in that 2-week window, because they bloom at different times, actually lasts about a month. You know, depends on when they're budding out. My brother and I had no idea how many we sprayed until one day. And my brother, that day, was spraying, and I was pulling hose for him. Now these guns generate 600 plus pounds of pressure. I can spray 150 feet, looks like a machine gun. And I didn't have all my PPE like I should have, but you know, I'm a ways from him. He's up there, he's got his on, he's spraying. I come around the back side of a tree pulling that hose. Brother didn't notice me where I was at, and he brought that gun down, hit me in the face with 600 pounds of pressure. That makes you want to whip your brother. I don't care how old you are, you want to whip that. You know, I was mad about that. But I got that Florel in my mouth, I got my eyes, and I went, oh God, I've gotten sick on chemicals before spraying. I went, maybe I better go look one more time. Let's read that baby one more time. It had more meaning to me now because I'd swallowed it. Well, I opened it up. Sometimes when chemicals come out, we're in such a lawsuit happy world now that these chemicals come out and we over-caution people. Just covering your own rear ends what they're doing. I understand. But I went back and I read it, and it said, ooh, don't ingest this. It'll eat the lining out of your stomach. Don't let it fall on a car. It'll eat the paint off of cars. And my brother and I were going, whoo, it looks like some liability with this stuff. You know, like he said, it's a juice worth the squeeze, and it was getting right away. So we went, hey, let's back off that stuff. Let's don't spray that. You know, let's don't do that much anymore. Not commercially out for people. Interesting thing, I told this same story last week at another company here in town, and some people afterwards came up and said, man, back in the 90s, yeah, we found out about it. We called the company here in town. It wasn't me. I was in Broken Arrow. Called another company here, and they had them come out and spray. Said, no sweet gum balls. It was awesome. Said the next year we called them and said, hey, you sprayed that last year? Would you spray it again? And the guy said, I never sprayed that, and I won't spray it. I'm thinking he read the same thing I did. You know, I was like, but the interesting side of it is those MSDS sheets change over time. Like DDT, we used to think it was safe, then we found out it wasn't. I had my AMAT class the other night. We were going over this stuff. I said, pull up Florel. I want to see what it says. They have so deregulated that now that I think you can put it on your post toasties and eat it for breakfast. So it's safe to spray at your house. But initially, they scared us, you know, pretty bad by it. So anyway, as when we deal with chemicals, we may find out 10 years from now that Dr. Pepper's got something in it that's getting us. You know, we hope not, but you know that could happen. So when you get your new MSDS sheets in,
I don't know.
make sure you're paying attention to those.
Mine went to sleep on yet.
Okay, I'll keep talking while she wakes that up. Okay. So guys, whenever, do you all know where your MSDS sheet is? Book?
Yes.
That?
I know, it's right in there.
She knows where
Do
it's
the
at.
rest of you know where it's at? Point to it. Where's it
I
at?
don't work.
Right around the corner, Amber, on the bottom shelf.
Can you grab
And
that
that
for
room,
me?
yeah, grab it. There's 2 of them. Not resource room.
So guys, if you haven't, and I take it that probably some of you aren't as familiar as I'd like for you to be, at break sometime, just get it out and read that thing. Kind of familiarize yourself with what
We're gonna
chemicals
need
we
more than
have
a
in
break.
here.
I'm just saying.
Because if she gets exposed, something splashes in her eyes, and you've got to go make a decision, do I flush her eyes or not? You need to be familiar with where that's at, what the chemicals are, and how we deal with them. Okay, this is probably one of the best videos I've seen that OSHA actually has put out. I'm sure that the guy is a nerd. He sounds like a bureaucrat. I'm sure he's never been on a horse, but you'll give him your attention. It's good information. 16 minutes here, so and then we'll wrap up.
Is it coming up? It's on. Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's on.
Wow.
Awesome.
Theater yard.
Not
In the
moving.
window I asked for. It'll be dark anymore, right?
It says it's going. I don't see anything.
You can.
There you go. We're weird off They told me
No, I didn't have this one. Okay, there we go.
Published the Hazard Communication Standard. This was one of the first major new standards since the original OSHA rules were published in 1971 and was often referred to as the Employee Right to Know Standard. That's because it was developed to help ensure workers had access to information and training about the hazards of the chemicals and products they were exposed to at work. One of the major requirements of the HAZCOM standard was container labeling. But while the standard mandated that manufacturers provide specific information about their products on container labels, HAZCOM was a performance-based standard, meaning there was no specific format that had to be followed. As a result, container labels took on all shapes and forms, in part because manufacturers were free to use many different hazard warning and rating systems on their container labels. As you can imagine, all these different labeling systems led to a lot of frustration among workers. The Hazard Communication Standard was not meeting its original intent, which was to help employees know exactly what they were working with, how it could harm them, and most importantly, how to protect themselves. So in 2012, OSHA revised their Hazard Communication Standard, and a major part of that revision was how containers had to be labeled. While manufacturers still have to put labels on their containers, now that information has to follow a specific format. And there is a standardized hazard classification system that must be utilized on container labels to convey information about the physical and health-related hazards associated with that product. The HAZCOM standard also requires employers to train their employees on how to read and understand the new GHS labeling system. So the standard changed from employee right to know to employee right to understand. To improve information available to workers, OSHA adopted the labeling requirements of the GHS. That stands for the Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals. The GHS is a standardized system, meaning there will be consistency in the information appearing on container labels once this system is fully adopted. This system was developed by the United Nations, which means that, once fully implemented, container labels for products from around the world will be standardized, which is of increased importance in our global economy. Here is an explanation of the information that must appear on container labels. First is the product or chemical identifier. This may be the name of the product itself, or, as in this label, the specific name of the chemical. This information will also match up to the safety data sheet, or SDS, for the product. Next is a signal word. There are only two that are used in this system. Either the word danger, which indicates a relatively severe or immediate hazard, or warning, which indicates a less severe, but still potentially harmful level of hazard. The next section contains one or several hazard statements. These standardized hazard statements give employees a quick warning about the hazards that are associated with the product and differ according to the classification and category of hazard or hazards presented by that product. The next section of the container label shows what are known as precautionary statements. These too are standardized in the GHS labeling system and in general convey information about how to prevent or lessen exposure to the chemical, as well as considerations for storage of the product, first aid procedures to be used when accidental overexposure occurs, and, where applicable, information on how to respond to an accidental spill or release of the product, as well as information about its proper disposal. Additional safety and health related information can be found on the product's safety data sheet. GHS compliant labels must also display supplier information. This is where you will find the name of the manufacturer or distributor of that product, as well as their street address and telephone number. On some labels, you may see supplemental information about the product, such as directions for its use and possibly an expiration date for the product. And a key new requirement of the GHS labeling system, and something fairly new to us here in the United States, are pictograms. Pictograms are standardized icons that alert workers to the various hazards of the product in a container. There are 9 different pictograms used in the GHS labeling system. Pictograms will appear on all container labels, each one depicting a different health or safety hazard applicable to the particular product in that container. Some labels may have only one pictogram because there is only one class of hazard associated with that product. However, most labels will probably display multiple pictograms. By the way, pictograms appearing on a product label can also be found on the safety data sheet for that product, where you can get even more detailed information about hazards and recommended precautions. The first pictogram we will discuss is an icon of a flame. Obviously, this is associated with flammable liquids, solids, and aerosols, and will appear on labels for those products. This pictogram will also appear on labels of products that emit flammable gases, those which are pyrophoric, which means the chemical can possibly ignite within minutes of being exposed to air, self-heating chemicals, self-reactive chemicals, and organic peroxides, which are found in many products such as catalysts and curing agents. This pictogram of a flame over a circle identifies materials that are classified as oxidizers. While similar in appearance to the flame pictogram we just covered, oxidizers are actually materials that cause or contribute more oxygen to the combustion process, making other materials burn much more rapidly than they normally would. So care must be taken to avoid storing these products near flammable and combustible materials. The third pictogram depicts an exploding bomb and appears on products that are explosive. It can also be found on labels for self-reactive products and for organic peroxides. The compressed gas cylinder will appear on labels of cylinders of compressed gas under pressure. Care must be taken when handling these cylinders because in the right conditions, a broken regulator or valve can cause the cylinder to become a projectile. Also, when a compressed gas leaks into an enclosed space, such as through a leaking hose or crack valve, the gas can fill up the space and cause an oxygen-deficient atmosphere. And some gases are liquefied so they can be placed inside a cylinder. Some of these gases rapidly expand and cool when released from the cylinder and can even cause frostbite injuries if the gas makes contact with any part of your body. The corrosion pictogram will appear on labels affixed to containers of corrosive chemicals and products. Obviously, getting something corrosive onto your skin could cause a chemical burn, and the same could be said if you get any into your eye. But these products can also be corrosive to metals, which means they could corrode containers and other articles made from metal, causing them to break or leak. The skull and crossbone pictogram identify chemicals and products that present an acute toxicity hazard. The toxic effects of overexposure to these poisonous products could even be fatal in the right doses. Acute means the effects happen relatively quick as opposed to over a long period of time, which leads us to our next pictogram. The health hazard pictogram identifies toxic chemicals and products that can cause health problems over a long period of time, such as carcinogens, which can lead to cancer, mutagens, which can cause alterations in your DNA and affect your offspring, reproductive hazards, which could affect the ability of men and women to have healthy children, respiratory sensitizers, which could cause you to have an allergic reaction when exposed to that chemical at even low levels after you have had an initial overexposure. Chemicals that can cause damage to or affect the function of certain organs, and aspiration toxicity hazards, which could lead to the development of chemical pneumonia. A very broad category of chemicals and products are identified by the next pictogram, which is an exclamation mark. This symbol is associated with several products and chemicals that, relatively speaking, represent lesser levels of health hazard, but still require you to take precautions. For example, many chemicals and products are considered an irritant to your skin or to your eyes, while others can have a similar effect on your respiratory tract when they are inhaled. This icon also covers chemicals that could cause you to have an allergic skin reaction after subsequent exposures, and some of these chemicals could have an acute effect on your health that, while less severe than those identified by the skull and crossbones pictogram, still require you to utilize precautions so you don't suffer any ill effects. Chemicals that have a narcotic effect on your central nervous system are also categorized in the exclamation mark group, as are any products that have a harmful effect on the ozone layer, although OSHA does not enforce the use of this pictogram for ozone damage because it does not directly affect the health of workers. And finally, this last pictogram appears on labels of chemicals and products that are considered toxic to plants and aquatic animals. However, while this pictogram may be required by other agencies to appear on container labels, OSHA does not enforce the use of this pictogram since it will not directly affect the health and safety of exposed workers.
Unless you poison the water and eat the fish out of it.
As previously mentioned, at least one, but in many cases, 2, 3, or even more of these pictograms will appear on the labels of containers of chemicals and products covered by the OSHA Hazard Communication Standard, as well as on safety data sheets. So read them and heed them, as you will need to be aware of the hazards posed by the various products you use at work. Also, keep in mind that pictograms are not intended to replace all other hazard identification symbols, as some of those are required by other government agencies, such as the Department of Transportation or Environmental Protection Agency, so you may continue to see them on containers along with pictograms. And in addition to containers of chemicals and products that we purchase from vendors, employers will need to make sure that all in-house labeling systems incorporate the required information by the deadlines established by OSHA. Speaking of deadlines, here is an overview of some very important dates. The revised Hazard Communication Standard, which requires the use of GHS-compliant labels on containers, was published on March 24th of 2012, and OSHA is giving manufacturers and distributors of hazardous chemicals and products until June 1st of 2015 to make sure all containers display the updated labels. However, many manufacturers and distributors are already starting to use compliant labels on their containers, or will be doing so long before the due date. So OSHA requires employers to get a head start and begin training all of their workers on how to read and understand those labels, and they have until December 1st of 2013 to get that training done. On a related note, employers must also update their written hazard communication programs by June 1st of 2016 to reflect the changes brought about by the adoption of the GHS system of labeling and hazard classification.
So, in the essence of time, I'm going to run through a couple of MSDS sheets with you. As the handouts that came around, you've got a big document. It's a thick document. Actually, is the standards itself. The front 2 pages of that thick one, this one says OSHA fact sheet. The front 2 pages of that talk about the items that have to be on any, what we call now SDS labels. Now, we aren't in the business of manufacturing a chemical or packaging a chemical. That's a whole different deal with different companies. But those are the items that have to be on those labels. The other things that it talks to you about in there, and one of the dates that I just referenced, the OSHA requires that we go through the training by December 1st, which is coming up on us pretty quick. So we've met that target. The actual manufacturers of the chemicals have until June 1st of 2015 to actually update these to the new format. Now, some companies already have done that. In fact, I'm going to hand you out 2 today. I just chose the chemical. I chose malathion. And so I'm going to hand out one of those to everybody. In fact, you should have the very first one. It looks like this. It's a MSDS sheet at the top. It says it says Material Safety Data Sheet. That's one cue to me that this isn't the revised one. It's still legal. If I bought this chemical from Chemtrek today, this is the one they'll send me. Now, I know and they know that they've got until June of 15 to give me the new version. Malathion's an old chemical. Once it passes its patent time, then anybody can manufacture it. So in a minute, I'm going to hand you malathion. It's manufactured by another company known as Nov, and they have revised theirs. And it does have the new symbols on it. But let's look real quick. Let's run through the old version. By the way, that big thick handout, after you get to the first 2 pages, is great reading material if you're having trouble going to sleep. Or if you need something to read in the bathroom. But let me tell you what it does. Is on one side it talks about the old guidelines that were established in '94, and then it gives you the new guidelines on the right-hand side of the page for comparison. Hey, it's great information, but we changed this word, we changed that word. I gave you a copy of it so you can look at it. Last page of it's got the 9 pictograms on it we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, but now, the Material Safety Data Sheet for malathion, the old one, let's take a look at it real quick. At the top, tells me who made it, gives me a contact phone number, product identification. That really didn't change when we go to the new one in a minute. It says it's malathion 57%, talks about its hazard rating, talks about its flammability. Does it have a high or low flammability number? Okay, so that means is it super flammable or not? It will burn, but it's not easily ignitable. It tells me that. I need to know that. Next thing it does is hazardous ingredients. Tells me what's inside of that. What is malathion made up of? Physical data. We go down and it gives us the boiling point. It gives us the appearance, the odor. Some way to identify it when we see it. Okay, then the last on that page says fire and explosion data. There's an error on this. One of the guys, get a bunch of educators together and we'll find the errors. But in a minute you'll see this. Look at the flash point. Flash point means where it'll ignite at. What's it say?
123.
That's not right. It's 123 degrees Celsius, not 123 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll show you that in just a minute. Not that you know that off the top of your head, but that isn't incorrect. That's incorrect in this one. Turn the page. We get to the next page. It's only a 2-page document. Tells us the reactivity data is it's pretty stable. If there's mixing, if there's chemicals I can mix it with, usually that's covered in mixing rates. A document that comes with the chemical itself. Like I told you earlier, I add 7 to this a lot, and it says, yep, you can do that. They don't react with each other. There are chemicals we don't want to mix, and you probably have them here, I would guess, or if you don't, you have them in your kitchen. What's 2 chemicals you darn sure better not mix in your kitchen? Bleach and ammonia. Bleach and ammonia. Peroxide's another one that you can get in trouble with. But bleach and ammonia are pretty safe on their own. You mix them, all of a sudden you get what?
Chlorine gas.
You get gas. There you go. So there's several things that we don't want to mix because there's a byproduct to it. The bomb at Oklahoma City. If any of you guys live on a farm, you probably have handled ammonium nitrate. Man, I have no idea how many tons of ammonium nitrate I've had my hands on, how many gallons of diesel I've had my hands on. Well, what happens when you put them together?
Oh, good bomb.
Make a great bomb. Okay, so we've got to be careful. When we mix things, we've got to pay attention. What's its reactivity? Health hazards. Let's look at this health hazard say. What's it say if I get it on if I swallow some, you're working beside me, and I accidentally swallow some, I grabbed the wrong cup and drank it, thought it was tea, what are you going to do for me? What do you want me to do?
Vomit. Do not.
Poison control center immediately.
Okay, so here's a couple of quick things. I might start vomiting, I might get sick,
Don't induce it.
but don't induce it. Okay, sometimes it wants you to get it out of your system.
Yeah.
Other times, some of that stuff is so caustic that all you're doing is eating up your...
Softening.
Yeah, so you don't want to do it. So you need to look at that and go, okay, what... You know, this happened to me one time with malathion. I was working outside, had it on me all day long, and it was very hot, and I got sick. These same symptoms happened to me. And so you go back to the MSD sheet and you go, okay, is that what's causing it, or do I have the flu? And you go, well, it could be this. Okay, spill or leak protection, special information as you look down there, ventilation, where you store it, those types of things. Okay, real quick, we into the new one. One of the things that you're going to notice as you look at the new format, and by the way, regardless of the chemical, it'll always be in this format now. So when the new ones come out, this is malathion, it's the same stuff you just looked at, different manufacturer who's already updated. When the current manufacturer, the one you looked at first, updates hers, it'll look like this as well. Now, yeah, we splurged and spent a little bit on colored ink here because I wanted you to see that, everybody get one of those? Yep. Okay. With the new pictograms, how many of them are there? Anybody pay attention? 9, okay. And it's always a square, outlined in red, and then the symbol will be on the inside that tells us. So as I look at this, right off the bat, what do I know? What's that first symbol? We talked about it a minute ago. Environment. Hey, I want to draw your attention to something. Turn over to page 5. This is unique. I don't know why. But look at page 5. Look down at how it affects different animals. Why is bobwhite quail listed there? They didn't put this together for Oklahoma. They put this together for around the world. Why aren't mountain quail listed? Why aren't blue quail listed? I don't know. But it affects bobwhites. Rainbow trout. It specifically tells us what negative effect it has on different animals. Earthworms. Okay? Bees. Guys, bees is a big one. There's a lot of companies, a lot of environmental groups have been trying to get malathion banned. Because one thing is we spray fruit trees trying to get rid of bugs, unintentionally we're killing our bees in the same 10 years ago.
Oh, sorry. I would say it says that it's non-mandatory, so they don't have to put that on there if it kills stuff. Why would they not want it?
Because OSHA is all about the person. Okay? Now, I would say.
You can't eat it because it would kill all the animals.
I know. I'd say it's right. But if 10 years ago, you can find it on the internet. There was a guy in California had a big orchard. And the environmentalists were saying, we're going to ban malathion from California, no more malathion. And this owner said, I got to have malathion or I'll have bugs and it'll kill my crops. He said, I'll show you how safe malathion is. And on television, fills a glass and drinks a glass of malathion on television. I don't know what happened to him later, but I'm telling you, that ain't a good plan. Because my granddad, in 1993, when he sold me the spray rigs, all that time he said, son, remember, whatever kills a bug will eventually kill you. So it's not good for us. You know, we get careless with it, but it can have a negative effect on it. I'll tell you something else while I'm on that kick. I just want to say this. I'm not picking on anybody, and I shouldn't have this on the video, but I love the smell of cigarette smoke. I've never smoked in my life. Okay, I've never smoked in my life, not once, but that smell doesn't bother me. Okay, cigarette smokes are like chemicals. We're all unique chemical systems. Why is it that George Burns, some of those guys can smoke to 106 and never get cancer? And then we get a high school kid that lights up and within a year he's got cancer. Why does that happen? These chemicals react to us differently. And so it pays us, pays us well to look at these MSDS sheets. We find out things every day about them. Maybe they're not as dangerous or maybe they're more dangerous. We need to know those things. Look at them. Okay, I'm going to run through this and we'll finish up. Underneath that, you'll see under the hazard identification, you see the pictograms. Those are very, very helpful for us. Turn the page. We go over and look at composition, inflammation, and ingredients. Tells you that again. Tells you what to do if swallowed, if you get it on your skin. Look at the bottom of the page. I want to point that out. Firefighting measures. What's it say about the flash point where it ignites? 123 degrees Celsius or 253 degrees Fahrenheit. That says at room temperature it's not easily ignitable. If it's really hot, it will. That other chart, when we looked at it, said 123 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's different. Okay, next page, accidental release measures. If you spill it, here's how you clean it up. Handling and storage, exposure control, what PPE you need to have on. Tells you what it looks like, again, reactivity and toxicology. Okay, guys, that was kind of short and fast for you. I hope you got something out of that. If you use malathion around your house, take these with you. If you're not going to use it, instead of throwing it away, if you leave them for me, I'll use them for the next class, but I have plenty, so if you want to take one with you, feel free to do that. Malathion is a common chemical. If you go to Walmart and you buy some pesticide, look on the side of it. Good chance it's got malathion in it. Okay, you can buy labeled malathion, or it can be the ingredient of another. So, anyway, hope you got something out of that. Have a great day. I think it was a quick staff meeting.